This is part one of the Lightroom mobile demos. So this is just a screenshot I want to show you. These are the things I'm going to show you today. I will show you optics, but it's just buttons to turn on. So these are the main things, and I'm going to show you kind of the basic versions of them. There are some more advanced settings in there, but we're going to just talk about those today. Okay, so I'm going to launch my Lightroom mobile app, which is the LR. This is your first time using the app. You will have to edit your photos. Let me go home. Okay, so you're going to, you need to add your photos. So you can see I have my photos synced to go in here, but you will need to add the photos you want to edit. So at the bottom right, there's the plus button, the blue overall button, and it's the setting on the left. When you click that, you can pull a photo from your camera roll or perhaps from your files. And you can choose multiple photos to pull in. So you just want to go through and find the photo that you want to edit, or the photos, just depending. Okay, now once you pull that photo in, you will have these menus on the bottom, okay? We're going to talk about selective healing, crop, and profiles tomorrow in the second part of this video. For today, we're going to talk about the ones that I showed you. Okay, so first, auto is very simple. When you click it, it's going to do an auto edit. If you do not like it, you don't have to keep it. You don't even have to try it, but it is something you can try if you want to see what it looks like. At the top of our screen, you can see there's the hooked arrow that goes to the left. That's undo. So we're going to undo that. Okay, now the next button over light is the one you probably want to use every time on every photo. These are basic settings like exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. There is a curve setting. I will talk about that later, probably on the desktop version, because I don't want to confuse you. So we'll just keep it simple with the main sliders in this one. Exposure, you can make your photo lighter or darker if it is too light or too dark. Contrast is a great one. Let's say that you have a photo that has not enough contrast, you can pull it to the right. Or if you shot in hard light and you think the contrast is too strong, you could pull it to the left. Okay, the next sliders, highlight, shadows, whites, and blacks. These will allow you to lighten or darken those particular areas of the photos. So for example, the cat's fur is very dark. It's probably a shadow or a black. If I wanted to potentially lighten her fur, I could try bringing the shadows to the right, or I could bring the blacks to the right. You can see the shadows are light in there. If I wanted to darken those instead, I could bring those to the left. And then highlights and whites are going to be the light parts of your photo. So if you want to brighten the highlights or the whites, you can bring those to the right. Darken, you would bring them to the left. Okay, and this is a great way to emphasize lighting in your photo. Okay, next button over is color. So the color button gives us the choice at the top between black and white, and then I'll talk about the mix for color in a minute. If you want to do black and white for images because you think it's more effective, you can. Okay, if you don't want black and white, you don't have to. If you do black and white, you can change the temperature and tint, though it's not going to change color in this case. Okay, but it will make certain areas lighter or darker. A great thing to do if you do want to do black and white is to do it black and white, then go back to light and play around with your exposure, highlights, shadows, and whites. Okay, now if you are editing a color image, you can play with the temperature, tint, vibrance, and saturation, and then I'll also show you mix today. So temperature slider will make your image warmer or cooler. You can use this to color correct an image, or to, let's say you want to make an image feel and look warmer, you can go to the right for temperature. Or vice versa, you can go to the left if you want to cool it or make it more blue. The tint gives you the option of tinting it green or magenta. So for example, sunset photos, you may want to either color correct or you may want to emphasize the magenta color in the sunset. Vibrance and saturation are going to deal with how intense your color is. So if you bring either of these over to the right, your color will get more intense. And if you bring them to the left, it will be less intense. So it really depends on the effect that you're going for in your photo. Okay, now getting a little bit more detailed, which is a great setting, is your mix. Okay, mix allows you to select a specific color and then edit different parts of that color. So for example, if I wanted to edit the red rug, I could click on red, and then I can change the hue of the red, which is the actual color. I can make it purple red, or I can make it orange red. I can also change the saturation of just that color. I can make the red more or less intense with saturation. And then luminance is how light or dark that is. So I can go brighter to the right or darker red. If a color doesn't exist in your photo, like I don't have any purples or magentas, it's not gonna do anything to your photo. The color mix will only affect colors that are present. Okay, one more thing on the white balance here. There is a click-through menu that you can try the auto setting there if you would like. Okay, the next one over is effects. Okay, we're gonna skip split toning, it's a little bit more advanced, but we're gonna talk about these sliders. So texture, you can add texture to your image. This is good for things like if you're photographing animals and you wanna emphasize their fur, or you wanna emphasize the rough pavement on something, or if you prefer to smooth out texture, you can go to the left. Clarity is going to affect both contrast and your sharpness. So a good way to make an image pop is to add a little bit of clarity. If you want an image to be a little softer, you can take it away. You just want to avoid making an image look blurry like that. So just be cautious of overusing clarity in either direction. Okay, dehaze. I can't really show you on this image because I don't have haze, but if you have glare or haze in your image and you want to correct it, you can bring that up to the right. And if you want to make an image a little bit hazy, you can bring it to the left. Okay, last setting in here is your vignette. So the vignette is the edging of the photo. And you can either correct or add vignetting with this setting. You do just want to think about what the intent is. So if you add a dark vignette, for example, it's going to look a bit more ominous. That is not what you're going for. I would avoid that. If you have darkness on the edge that you don't like, you can bring it to the right and it will correct it and make the edges lighter. With any of these settings, just be cautious about overusing it. Like that is really, really intense. If you do use a vignette, you will have these sliders activated. You can change the midpoint of where the vignette starts. You can change how soft the vignette is. That's feather. And you can change how round it is with roundness. Okay, you can also color correct highlights in this screen. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and undo that stuff real quick. Okay, and then you do have a grain slider. I would not necessarily encourage you to use grain on your phone because it's very hard to tell. Even if I add a little bit of grain, it's getting pretty grainy here. And I was able to zoom in by pinching. Okay, the next screen over is detail. So if you need to sharpen your image up, you can add sharpening here. And then you can play with the setting of the strength of the radius to make it stronger or weaker. You can also increase the detail or decrease the detail. And then masking will add it, like it'll only add the sharpening to certain parts of the photo. So this is a good one where if you zoom in, you can kind of see where it's gonna affect the image. Okay, the last button here is optics. This is gonna correct lens errors that you may have in your image. You can always turn these buttons on if you're not sure and see if it does anything. So you can see I have a little bit of distortion, so that's why the enable lens correction button makes it shift a little bit. If I don't like it, I don't have to turn it on. What chromatic aberration is, it's like a color shift on the edge, and you get this with backlighting a lot, especially with things like trees. I don't have it, so it's not doing anything to my image, but you can always try and turn it on and see if it does correct something that is not looking good. Okay, that is it for part one. Now I just want to point out real quick, if you're satisfied with those adjustments, at the top you have your download button. Okay, and you can do a couple things. You can share it directly to yourself. You can export it to your camera roll, or at the bottom you can also export it with particular settings. Okay, if you wanted, for example, to airdrop it to yourself, then you could click share photo and you could airdrop it to your computer if that's where you wanted it. Or if you just want this version going to your camera roll, then you can export to your camera roll. And that way you can directly add it to the slides for. Okay, that is it for part 1 of our Lightroom demo.